Welcome back to the channel. Today's case is about the paranormal, but I wanted to put a disclaimer here that it is connected to a very real and very disturbing murder case that happened in 1912 and did involve children. So I wanted to pop that here so that you can decide whether or not you wish to continue listening before we get started. If you don't wish to continue listening, absolutely understand, and there are plenty of other videos out there that can hopefully bring some love to your eardrums today. Okay, we're gonna get started. In the heart of Iowa lies a small town with a dark secret, the Villisca Axe Murder House. The site of one of America's most gruesome unsolved crimes still casts a long shadow over the community. But this isn't just a tale of cold-blooded murder. To many, this house is a portal to the unknown, a place where the echoes of a horrific past refuse to fade. Welcome to the haunting story of the Villisca Axe Murders. In 1912, Villisca, Iowa was a small community, very typical of the rural Midwest. It had a population of around 2,500 people, and it was a place where everybody seemed to know their neighbours, and life revolved around agriculture, church, and family. It had a bustling main street with lots of businesses and shops, it had churches, and it had a railway line. One of the families that lived in Villisca at the time was the Moore family, consisting of Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. Josiah Moore was a successful businessman, and the family were active in their church. On the 9th of June, 1912, the Moores attended the Presbyterian church in the morning, and then in the afternoon, Sarah Moore and the children spent time rehearsing for the Children's Day service that would be held later that evening. 2 neighbour children who were friends of Catherine, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were also present rehearsing for the service, and they would end up staying the night at the Moore's home. The Moore family, along with the 2 Stillinger girls, attended the church service that evening, and that started at about 8 o'clock. They got home at some point after 9:30 and settled down for the night, with the family sleeping upstairs and Lena and Ina sleeping in the downstairs bedroom. Everything seemed ordinary, nothing seemed untoward, but at some point between midnight and 5 a.m, a brutal attack was carried out which would destroy lives and shatter the town's peaceful existence. It was the morning of June 10th, 1912, and the townspeople started to stir. Everything appeared normal at first, but the neighbours started to notice that the Moore house was eerily silent, and the family were not doing their usual morning activities. One of the neighbours, Mary Peckham, went over to the home and knocked on the door, but there was no reply. She tried to look through the windows, but the curtains were closed. Growing increasingly concerned, she decided to call Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. When Ross arrived at the property, he initially tried knocking and shouting to get the family's attention. However, that also didn't work, there was no response, and he ended up using a key that he had to unlock the door and step into the property. He stepped into the parlour, while Mary remained on the porch. At first he didn't see anything untoward. However, he opened the door to the downstairs bedroom, and it was then that he saw dark stains on the sheets and the shape of bodies underneath them. He then ran from the property and asked Mary to call for the Marshal Hank Horton. When Marshal Horton investigated the scene, the full horror came to light. Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children and 2 young guests, Lena and Ina Stillinger, had all been brutally murdered, slain in their beds while they slept, and the murder weapon had been left in the downstairs bedroom. An axe belonging to the Moore family was found leaning up against the wall. Now, investigators found some truly bizarre details at the scene. They found that each of the victims had had their faces covered after they had been killed. Not only that, but they found that curtains had been drawn and pieces of clothing had been put over mirrors and windows. Kerosene lamps were also found throughout the property with their chimneys missing, which was perhaps a way for the killer to have some light but not have it too bright in order to avoid waking people up. And they also found a slab of bacon placed in the downstairs bedroom next to the axe. Even more chillingly, this person had stayed in the property after they had finished their brutal attack. They had washed their hands in a basin in the kitchen, leaving some bloody water, and they'd also prepared some food, which they didn't eat. They'd left a small plate of food in the kitchen, and when they'd left, equally strangely, they had locked the door behind them. Unfortunately, when the townspeople heard the news, a large number, estimated to be over 100, came to the house and were allowed inside, leaving the crime scene completely compromised. It wasn't until later in the morning that a perimeter was installed, but by this time it was already too late. However, several possible suspects were identified, including a minister, Reverend George Kelly, who had come to Villisca for the Children's Day services. Reverend Kelly had left the town in the early hours on the 10th of June and had allegedly spoken to people about 8 souls having been killed in Villisca before the victims had been discovered. He later confessed to the murder, but then recanted and was acquitted by 2 juries. Other suspects included Frank F. Jones, a state senator and previous employer of Josiah Moore. It was alleged that he had hired a hitman, William Mansfield, to kill Josiah. Mansfield was a suspect in another axe murder case involving his own family, but he had an alibi for the night of the Villisca murders and was released. Andy Sawyer, a transient who apparently slept with an axe and had shown an interest in the case, was also considered a suspect, but there was no evidence linking him to the crime and he was never charged. Another theory is that the family were murdered by a suspected serial killer who had been travelling through Villisca via the railways. Now, there were indeed other tragic crimes across the Midwest over a certain period of time that were eerily similar to the Moore family murders, but if they were connected, this was never officially proven or a perpetrator formally identified. More than a century later, this horrific crime remains unsolved. There are a lot of theories, but there has never been formal identification of the person or persons responsible. However, that was not the end of the story. The house saw several owners and renters in the following years, and in 1994, it was restored to how it had been in 1912. It was subsequently opened to the public, offering tours and overnight stays. And it wasn't long before whispers began about strange occurrences in the house. Over the years, countless visitors have reported inexplicable phenomena. There have been reports of disembodied voices, children's laughter, orbs. Some people have seen a strange fog moving from room to room, and others have felt like they've been touched or pushed. Some people have described feeling intense negative emotions when they're in the property, such as fear, sadness, or even rage. Others have had the sensation of being scratched and seen scratch marks there afterwards. There are also reports of footsteps when nobody is present, and some people have even claimed to see a shadow man. In 2014, an unfortunate and very unsettling incident occurred whereby a ghost hunter had come to stay in the property overnight and had been discovered with a self-inflicted chest wound. He was rushed into the hospital and later explained that he'd been alone in the children's bedroom, trying to provoke the spirits, and the next thing he knew, he was in the emergency room. He did eventually return to the house and actually apologised for his previous behaviour. But it does make you wonder, did he come into contact with the spirits of the victims? Or is there some dark energy now residing there? Even skeptics leave with more questions than answers. Is it all just a trick of the mind? Or is there something otherworldly going on at the Villisca house? The Villisca Axe Murder House is more than a crime scene. It's a place where history, tragedy, and the unexplained collide. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, one thing is certain: this house holds onto its secrets tightly, whispering them only to those brave enough to listen. So, what do you think? Do you believe that these hauntings are real? Do you believe that perhaps it is just imagination or a trick of the mind? Whatever the truth behind this is, we should take a moment to remember the Moore family and to acknowledge that a truly awful crime was committed that impacted the lives of so many innocent people. Thank you for coming with me on this journey. Please do share your thoughts in the comments below, whether you're a believer or a non-believer. And if you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that we can continue our explorations into the paranormal together. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and stay out of the dark. Thanks for watching.